Another edition of the Alden Report. Folks, I always say I'm excited. I am always excited. I'm so excited to be here today. Folks, my next guest is Nolan Bushnell. He is the founder of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese's. Newsweek actually named him one of the 50 men who changed America. He is really an innovator, and he's continuing to change the world of technology, even with his latest company, Brainrush. I'm really excited that he was able to take the time with us today. Nolan, thanks for being my guest.
My pleasure.
All right, wonderful. So what we like to do is we have a list of questions. We ask everybody the same questions, and we'll just kind of feed off each other from there. Is that okay?
Excellent.
All right, wonderful. All right, so first question, Mr. Bushnell, how do you define success? And I ask that question to everybody, and you have obviously experienced what most people would consider just extreme success with your success of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese's, but how do you define it?
Well, I think that it's actually, I can think of so many dimensions. I think success is sort of having peace of mind throughout your life.
Sure.
But I also think solving hard challenges is success. I think having a great family is a success. I think doing good works is a success. And I have a hard time distilling it into a catch-all phrase. But I think sort of if you can look back on your life and say, it was an interesting life and I was kind of a good person.
Yeah, I like that. I think you're right, and the reason why I ask it is because everyone seems to have difficulty answering that question, and everyone does seem to have a little bit of a different perspective on it. But I like what you said. At the end of the day, when you leave this earth, do you feel like you contributed to people like what you did? And I think that's a great way and a healthy way to look at it. And one of the reasons why I ask it too, and I'm sure you're seeing this now in the way the world is changing with all these different social media avenues and such, is that we see these people who are projecting these images of success in the material sense. Someone will post a picture of them in their Ferrari or in their beautiful house or the nice watches and all these other things, but it's really not truly success if at the end of the day if you're not happy and if you didn't really contribute to the world, right?
Exactly. And, one of the things that my life has shown me very clearly is I went through a phase of massive wealth, and I lost most of it, and then I gained some of it back. And I can honestly say that my happiness didn't change. I was pretty much as happy when I was poor as when I was rich. I had a few better meals and could travel a little more when I was rich, but in the overall scheme of things, the material wealth, I think, is so close to vacuousness that it's in the. I don't even think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 on my ideas of what makes you happy.
And I really appreciate that for someone like yourself as well. That if, like you said, you've achieved extraordinary things in the business world, and I know just a couple of years ago you sold Chuck E. Cheese's for close to $1 billion, and so that's just an extraordinary thing. But you're right; it's not necessarily about the money. And I tell people that as well. I mean, I haven't even come close to the level that you've achieved, but I've had some pretty decent success throughout my life, and money is it makes things easier, but it definitely does not define success or happiness.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for that. Throughout your life, again, you were one of the original founders of Atari. Again, as someone who's in his 40s, I just smile and think about the great times that I had when I was a kid in my basement, playing Pong and Asteroids and all these other games. So it's such a great honor to have you here. But so for someone like yourself that has built companies, that has sold companies, and continue to grow companies, what have you found has been your biggest professional obstacle, and how did you overcome it?
Well, I think that the biggest problem that you ever have is convincing others that your idea is a good one. And it's this funny thing that the more revolutionary your idea is, the harder it is to convince somebody. The more it's different than what people currently have. And I think back on the way people thought about the car when it was first invented, or even the telephone when it was first invented. It clearly have changed our lives.
Sure.
And right today, how people are viewing the coming robotics revolution with fear and trepidation, when in fact I think it's going to, usher in a tremendous lifestyle, because if you take out labor in a lot of things, you drop the cost, and that gives you more money to spend on other things. And if my notion is correct, nobody ever runs out of ideas of ways to spend money, and so they'll just spend money in a different place, creating different jobs that are more labor intensive, and that's the way it's always been.
Right. Now, so I thought you were going to go down a different road when you mentioned that you talk about convincing people of your ideas, and I've read your book, Finding the Next Steve Jobs, and obviously I've read a lot about you. And let me ask you this: since again I worked at Chuck E. Cheese's when I was a kid. Was it difficult convincing the world to launch a chain of restaurants, so to speak, with a rat as essentially the mascot?
You could not believe how skeptical the world was. I mean, imagine you're sitting in a room of venture capitalists and say, "Okay, here's the idea. We're going to create a pizza parlor that's 10 times bigger than any other pizza parlor's ever been. We're going to put a whole bunch of games in there, too. And wait, there's more. A talking mechanical rat. It's going to be huge."
That, you know what, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall there. Again, we are talking with Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese's. Really, really excited to have him here and have him share with us some of the things that he's done throughout his life. You can find him at nolanbushnell.com, and you can learn a little bit more about some of the latest things that he's doing and how he's continuing to change the world. Nolan, education, it's like you mentioned before, how the world is changing with robotics and things like this. I see how education is rapidly changing. Is traditional higher education important for success?
No, and in fact, a significant amount of higher education is actually toxic to success.
Really?
Starting out with $100,000 worth of student debt is a millstone around any entrepreneur's neck. And just at a time when you're forming a family and maybe wanting to buy a house, all of a sudden you've just got this debt that is just, around your shoulders. More than that, a significant number of degrees don't pay for themselves, never will. And so to take those degrees and student debt is just foolishness. And I encourage people that if they're thinking that going to college is a good way to extend adolescence, think again. It's a huge mistake.
So would you recommend, so let's say you have a high school student who is, deciding whether or not they're going to college or not. They're not quite sure what they want to do with life, and, maybe college is their route. Would you recommend taking a year off and kind of trying to find themselves, or what would you say to them?
I would say get a job for a year. Go to Europe. Get a Euro pass. It's cheaper. Bum around a little bit. See the world. Go to Las Vegas and go to every trade show.
Right.
Because there's a couple of things about education that we know. One is abstract learning is not sticky. Whereas if you're learning for a purpose, it becomes very sticky. So the kid who goes to college with a career path in mind is much more successful than somebody who's trying to discover themselves at an extremely high cost.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I did go to college, and then I did kind of what you mentioned, I worked right after college, and then I got a Europass. I had smiled when you said that, and did the whole, traveling Europe and just kind of seeing the world type thing. And not only was it an amazing experience just to be able to see the world, but it was just also, a lot of fun, and it truly did, kind of broaden my horizons. In fact, I remember when we were mapping it out, I said, well, I want to go to this country, this country, this country. And then when we got there, we realized actually how big Europe really was. You don't realize it, but that's,
I've actually practiced it with my own kids. I've got kids with degrees and kids that have started their business the day they graduated from high school, and their success is equivalent.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Yeah. That's, and people always talk about how, and I'm sure you probably know him personally, how Bill Gates, dropped out, and I actually read obviously Steve Jobs' bio. And by the way, Nolan Bushnell is the only person to ever have hired Steve Jobs because when he worked at Atari as a programmer. But you hear about how even Steve Jobs, how he dropped out of college and then went on his kind of journey, and he attributes a lot of his success to what he learned outside of college, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what another thing that happens is funny is education sometimes trains out passion and trains out creativity, which are two horrible amputations. Without passion, life is not that interesting, and it's very hard to get success if you're not passionate about it.
I couldn't agree with you any more than what you just said. I think I'm very passionate about what I do, and there have definitely been situations or points in my life, and I think a lot of people go through that. I'm sure you have as well, where you're doing something. It's kind of a means to an end. You're not really passionate about it, but when you get to that point where you're passionate about it, and we talked earlier about happiness, that's when the real happiness kind of factor kicks in, and truly defining what success is if you're passionate about what you do. Nolan, you always hear people say, well, you got to be passionate about what you do. How do you, I know we have these lists of questions, but how do you find what you're passionate about? Is it like you said before, just going off and exploring and just really, like you said, kind of just walking around the world and trying to figure it out? Or how does someone find what they're passionate about?
It's. I don't think there's a formula.
Sure.
I think that I really like the idea of people having a lot of different jobs. Like I probably, before I settled in to Atari, I probably had 20 different jobs growing up, all the way from construction to working in an amusement park to selling advertising, to selling encyclopedias, to selling car insurance, to I just did I even worked in a menswear store for a while, and I think that all of those creates a patina of life experiences that help you decide, at the very least, things that you definitely don't want to do again.
Sure. Exactly. It's interesting you said that as well, and I know we do have. I try to stay on point with the list of questions, but I just, again, when you have someone like you with your experience, I just want to try and get as much out of you as I can. So I hope you don't mind. But you'd mentioned some of the jobs that you had, and one of the jobs you had mentioned was that you worked at an amusement park. And I obviously read a little bit about you. I've known who you are because you actually endorsed my first book, Ask More, Get More, which, by the way, thank you very much for that. Is it true that you got the idea for the video game world and Atari by working in the amusement park? And actually, on top of that, now that I think about that, it may even have inspired you to have created the idea of Chuck E. Cheese's, right?
It was definitely a formative experience because working in the amusement park, I got to see a whole bunch of people at leisure and kind of developed a sense of what would please them and what wouldn't please them, and kind of that marketplace. When I was manager of the games department, I learned the economics of the arcade business. So when I was able to play a game at the university when I was in engineering school, I said, man, if I can make this cost effective, people will put money in it. And so in some ways, the arcade was the market experience, and the engineering degree was the technical expertise, and so really starting Atari was all about how do I make it cheap enough. It was a cost reduction plan,
Sure.
pure and simple. The rest of it was done.
And you probably wouldn't, like you said, you probably wouldn't even experience that if it hadn't been for the fact that you had multiple jobs, you had multiple life experiences. So I think that's, again, another great lesson so far, and we're so early into it. Now, you right now, I think one of your biggest ventures right now is Brainrush. You can go to brainrush.com. It's a website where you can really kind of enhance your brain and your skills. And right now, and it's really designed for the older generation, right? Is that what the website's for?
It's actually multi-generational.
Okay.
It's just a way of learning things very fast and clearly. For example, geography. Can you place the names and the locations of all the South American countries, or let alone Africa?
Don't put me on the spot, please.
Yeah, I couldn't do it until I did a couple of the brain rushes.
Someone on Periscope says they can do it. I don't know if I believe her, but that's okay.
Anyway, it's and that sort of thing. I'm also getting ready to spin up a school, a startup school, teaching some of the core skills that I taught my kids, and I think that since I've got 7 of my 8 kids are entrepreneurs, and I just want to teach the world what I taught my kids.
Wow, that's interesting. I want to talk to you a little bit more about that. So, but right now, for Brainrush and even for the school you're talking about, in the world has changed again so rapidly, and it continues to change. In your current business venture now with Brainrush and even with the school, what do you find is the most effective form of marketing? How are you getting the word out? What are you doing as someone who has again been named by Newsweek as one of the 50 men who have changed America? What are you doing right now to market these businesses?
Well, it's very interesting. I am just starting to put together the marketing plan for the school. So I haven't gone loud. We'll be going loud on that project in about 2 weeks. That means I'll be hitting Twitter. I'll be hitting all the social media. I've got a couple of radio interviews set up. I'll probably end up somewhere on HuffPo and Breitbart and TechCrunch, and I really believe today, particularly the people who are making these kinds of decisions are connected people, and it's getting easier and easier to do it, and talking about it on podcasts, it's just all eyeballs, and then you get them to your website, and before you know it, you've got a customer.
So you're taking advantage of really what's out there right now in technology with social media, and really kind of evolving as the social media evolves to get the word out about the school and also even about Brainrush. Is that fair to say? Yeah,
that's correct.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, I follow you on Twitter, and I do see that you're pretty active on Twitter. Now, again, you have been in the business world for a very long time, achieved extraordinary success. You have a very large family, of course. How do you handle stress? I mean, what do you do to stay healthy and stay in shape and really kind of just step aside from the business side of things?
I made the decision when I was in college to be an existentialist. And what an existentialist says, we don't know exactly where we're going, but that the ride needs to be interesting. And what that allows you to do is to kind of look at your life as a third person and say, during the bad times, you can say, boy, this is interesting. I've never been in a bad time like this before. This is an interesting thing. I didn't realize this is the kind of thing you can do. And abstract yourself away from the stressful situations by looking at it as an interesting experience. And separate very clearly the things that you can change, things that you can't.
Sure.
And if you can't change it in that minute, don't worry about it. It doesn't help. And you say, yeah, it's easy for you to say. Well, it's not easy, but it can be done. There's the old hippie slogan, God give you the courage to change what needs to be changed, to not worry about the things that you can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. I really believe that. It's, the ability to change what you can and to not fret over the things you can't. I mean, I could get really wrapped around an axle about, radical Islam terrorism.
Sure.
But am I going to be able to affect it in any real way? Of course not.
Yeah, I think it's really great that you said that, and I try to do the same in my life as well. I try not to worry about really anything, like you said, that I can't control, and I try not to really worry too much really about anything. But one of the things that I try to do in my own personal life is, number one, I don't watch the news, which is I think is pretty healthy, whether people believe that or not. I just don't. And the other thing too is if it's my personal life and I have something that I'm concerned about, I don't worry about it. I try and prepare for it. And
exactly.
And that for me, I think it reduces the stress level as best we can. But that's
there's some actually good science behind that. If you have a plan to remedy what you don't like, that's almost as good as remedying it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of mental health. Whereas if you just fret without a plan, then it's kind of like pressure with no release. The planning for remediation is a release to that pressure, and so your mental health is better.
You know what? I'm glad you said that, so I'm just going to continue to do and continue to learn from people like you. So if it's worked for you, then it'll continue to work for me, I guess. That's wonderful. Now, this next sentence, I like to ask people to finish. And if my company lacks blank, then we will not succeed.
Say again.
Here's the sentence I like for people to fill in the blank. If my company lacks blank, then we will not succeed.
Customers.
Yeah, that's I've heard that one before.
Well, it's a thing where the business only has a right to succeed if there's fulfilling a need that somebody wants.
Right.
Otherwise, it's a hobby. And you have to be very clear when you have a hobby and when you have a business. And there are a lot of hobby jobs out there.
Right.
And it's seductive to, I don't want to pick on things, but there's an awful lot of musicians that are pursuing a hobby and they think that they're going to make a living at it.
Right.
There are way too many people who love to fly airplanes and they want to make a living at it, and it's really hard. A lot of people who want to do good, and they start a nonprofit and find that they can't support themselves.
Right.
There's a lot of people who want to go into interior decorating, and they're not good at it, and they flog around a little bit, but it's a hobby job for many people. And I could go on and on and on, but you've got to make sure that you're good enough that you can translate your hobby into revenue, or you should not do it. Horses is another great example of businesses that are really hard to make money in.
You know, it's refreshing that you say that, because there are a lot of people out there today that are selling a dream. You know, and I tell people that dreaming is for sleeping. And you know, obviously, you are not only a successful man, but a student of success. And you know, one of the things that I've really learned from others as well is basically just what you said is. You know, you had mentioned being passionate, which is very, very, very important. But there's also a point where people need to become realistic, right? And, you know, they need to be realistic in what they're trying to accomplish and whether or not that they're able to ultimately sustain life in their current hobby and or career, right?
Right. And also, there's an interesting dichotomy that happens between being the far-out innovator, the fast follower, or the I'm just going to do it better approach to business. And each has their place, but in all cases, you really have to identify what your secret sauce is going to be.
Yeah, you know what? That makes sense. It's funny. I was actually talking to a musician at a recent event, and one of the things that I give advice to people is that if you have that hobby, like you had mentioned, the hobby job, you can continue to do that, and you can continue to be passionate about that. But let's also make sure that we can put food on the table and maybe develop another set of skills and another career. And I'm not saying you don't be passionate or don't follow your, quote, dreams that people talk about. But like you said, the world is a difficult place, and you know, to make it as a musician, it's like being struck by lightning twice. So
yeah.
You know, follow your passion. Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned 7 of your 8 children are entrepreneurs, and I think that being an entrepreneur is one of the most difficult things you can do. But have a backup plan, right?
Right.
Oh, that's great.
Exactly.
Now, we're talking a little bit about young people. We're talking about musicians. You know, what would you give for advice for young people who are in the workforce on how to grow? And let me just back up a little bit. We are here with Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese's, and he is also one of the only people who have ever hired Steve Jobs. He's also the author of a great book called Finding the Next Steve Jobs. So again, Mr. Bushnell, what sort of advice would you give young people in the workforce today on how to grow?
Everything that you want to know is currently available free on the internet. And if you want to grow your skill set, just turn off the TV for an hour a day, or quit playing your video game for an hour a day, and go in and go into the sites where you can learn something. Like, everybody needs to know a little accounting if they want to grow themselves.
Sure.
All kinds of ways you can learn accounting on the web. You need to know a little bit of business law. There's all kinds of places you can do that. Look at what other people are doing. Spend, an hour a week pursuing all the projects on Kickstarter. It'll give you an idea.
Yeah.
Start going to meetups. Get around people who are passionate and who are in your community. And you don't have to necessarily start your own company. You can get together with 2 or 3 people, and you as a group, and you start a company as a group, and you keep your regular jobs, and all of a sudden you may get hit by lightning, and the company takes off, and pretty soon it can hire you all.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because how Nolan Bushnell, again, we're here with Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese's, and how you and I were even connected. We were connected because I ended up going to an event like you talked about, these masterminds that people talk about, and I met an individual by the name of Larry Benet, who then introduced me to you. And quite frankly, to be honest with you, I didn't even want to go to this event, but going to that event has truly changed my life. And I said this to you in an email before with all sincerity. You know, having you endorse my book, Ask More, Get More, has opened a lot of doors. And it was as a result of the advice that you just gave. So again, if you're a young person out there, if you're listening, a lot of events that you can go to, right, Mr. Bushnell, that are absolutely free.
Yeah, and sort of what you'd want to do is you want to get engaged in business life. And you don't have to be in business to start engaging in that society. But you can learn so much so quickly just by being around people who are in the business society, talking about business issues, solving business problems. You know, just drink from the fire hose, because the fire hose is running. Just get in front of it.
It makes a lot of sense. Now, can you, again, you've been so gracious for joining me and giving us your time. The next question I have for you is, can you give me, our listeners, our viewers, a secret strategy or business technique that makes you or has made you more efficient? And the reason why I ask this question is because I've grown a pretty substantial business, and I see people that are always busy with activity, but they lack accomplishment. What have you done, and what did you do even at Atari or even Chuck E. Cheese's and some of your current businesses right now that has made you and your company more efficient?
I always start with a marketing plan. I don't write a line of code. I don't do a bit of design until I'm convinced that I got the marketing pitch right. Because if you're looking at a marketing pitch or a sales pitch, what you're really doing is you're talking about the form, feature, and functions of your product or your service. And as you get the marketing plan right, it's almost a design document for the rest of your company. And so I start out literally by having an idea or seeing another idea that I think can be improved on tremendously, and I write a business plan around it. And this is just a little 2 or 3 page thing. You do a little research, you figure out what the market is, you figure out what the price sensitivity is. You figure out your secret sauce as to, how you're going to be better than, where you're going to be more effective than, where you're going to be cheaper than, where you're going to be faster than the competition, or the fact that this is a whole new area that people are going to want once they hear about it or once they use it. And then I let it marinate. I think that time, there's this funny balance between time and actualization. I believe, your background brain can do so much more processing than your foreground brain. And when you're in the moment, you're totally foreground brain. But if you sort of let your back brain compute things overnight or over a week or over a month, you get resolution. You get a deeper insight into what you're doing. And so at any point in time, I probably have 6 or 8 business plans that are sort of, I call them marinating. And then one of them will talk to me. And either there'll be a piece of technology that says now's the right time, or a particular skilled person will become available to me, and I said, that's the perfect person to run this, or to be the chief technical officer or the chief marketing officer. And I take it down, dust it off, and actualize it.
Now, can you give me an example of a real-life example of this, something that you've actually really applied in your life and it's turned into a company where you had the marketing plan, you let it marinate or incubate, and then you decided, you know what, after my brain has really kind of worked its way around it and literally wrapped my head around it, we move forward with it. Do you have a current example, or can you share something like that with us that you've done recently or even in the past?
Yeah, Brainrush fits that.
Okay.
And this entrepreneurial school fits that.
Okay.
And in fact, I wrote the business plan for the entrepreneurial school at the same time I did for Brainrush. And a guy came available to be a partner with me on that, and he was the perfect guy, and so I decided to do Brainrush first. And then another guy who was using the Brainrush software for a project of his, it was very clear that he was the ideal headmaster for the entrepreneurial school. So, it's a thing where I kind of knew where I was going, but I didn't know how I was going to get there. And then all of a sudden, the how knocks on the door, and you actualize.
Well, that makes sense, and thanks for sharing that with us. We're down to the last couple of questions. In this day and age, Mr. Bushnell, what do you think is the best form of communication? And I should probably change up that question a little bit. The best form of communication to your business partners, and then maybe the best form of communication to your customers in your current business life or even in the past.
I think websites have become very, very important. I think people today, when they're investigating a product or a service, they tend to go and look at the company website and get a lot of input. I think that there's the old thing: is it a Roper strategy or is it a Skinner strategy? And the idea is, what brings you to the site? That's one whole set of skills.
Sure.
Whether it be Twitter, whether it be television advertising, what have you. And then once you've got the eyeballs, how do you turn those eyeballs into buyers or participants? And so I think that you have to have both those skills equally balanced. If you're pulling in a whole bunch of eyeballs and not converting any of them, you're spending too much time on eyeballs and not enough on conversion.
Conversion, right. Well, I think that that also makes a lot of sense. Again, in this current age that we're in this digital age that we're in, the website is so important. So we're down to the last question. Again, we are here with Nolan Bushnell. This is the Alden Report. My name is Michael Alden. You can learn more about Mr. Bushnell at nolanbushnell.com. He is also on Twitter. You're also on Instagram too, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's also on Instagram. Again, you can just Google him. His background, his history is just truly, truly amazing. Again, Newsweek mentioned or recognized him as one of the 50 men that actually changed the American culture. Mr. Bushnell, again, thank you for being here. And one last question: if you could leave our viewers and listeners with one piece of business advice, and you've given us so much already, but maybe one more piece of business advice that you have done that has made you successful, what would that be?
Do one thing a day that moves your projects along. And there's 365 days a year, and if you do 365 important things, you'll get success, no matter what you're aiming those 365 things at.
I love it. Well, again, thank you so much for being my guest. My name is Michael Alden. This is the Alden Report. Folks, you've been listening to Nolan Bushnell, really, truly a business icon. And if you had listened earlier, he was also my former boss because I worked at Chuck E. Cheese, and he didn't know me. But that's okay because we had, how many Chuck E. Cheeses are there? Like hundreds of them all over the country.
When I sold, there were 280. They're now about 600. So I didn't.
You didn't visit every one of them, and you probably didn't come back. And although I'm sure you probably visited a lot of the kitchens to make sure things are running, right?
Oh yeah. I visited almost all the stores we had.
I was just about to end it, but I do want to just ask one quick question if you can. I know we're running a little bit late, but I want to ask one quick question. I talked about this in Ask More, Get More is. Chuck E. Cheese, what I learned at 15 years old was it you don't see it until you're really a part of it. Chuck E. Cheese was truly driven on and was successful as a result of the systems that you had in place. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. We tried to quantify and to systematize everything. And the whole idea of a system is that you can polish it, and it gets better and better, and pretty soon everything operates like a Swiss watch.
Well, again, I'm glad I asked that last question, because I remember when I was working in the kitchen as a young kid in high school, and I remember the most basic things of, how the dough was made, and there's a certain way to make it, and it's not even necessarily about the flour and the water, but it's it's how it's kneaded, and then from there it's how long it sat in the freezer to rise, and then from there it's how we cut it, and then even from there the pizzas themselves, we had a system on how how we put the pepperoni on and things like that, and I watched that, and I was 15 years old, and you don't quite think about it until now. And I've learned just from that experience. And earlier you were talked about your experience at the amusement park, and it's amazing how when we can come full circle about how those little experiences that we've had throughout life can really change our future. So you helped change my future, and you've come back again, and I want to thank you so much again. My name is Michael Alden. This is the Alden Report. We've been here with Nolan Bushnell. You can find more information about Mr. Bushnell at nolanbushnell.com, and we'll see you next time. All right, guys, how many times have you had days where your underwear just doesn't fit or feel right? I've had many of those days, and it's not just a personal problem, it's everyone's problem. No one likes watching you readjust. Fortunately, Tommy John has the cure. Tommy John, the 21st century men's underwear brand that provides mind-blowing comfort. I know because I discovered them, and I wear them every day. Now imagine this. Super light, breathable fabrics combined with state-of-the-art design for a fit so perfect, it's almost like wearing nothing at all, and it's impossible to get a wedgie. They even have this patented horizontal quick draw fly that'll revolutionize the way you go to the bathroom. So for a truly unbelievable undergarment experience, visit TommyJohn.com and enter Alden, ALDEN, at checkout and receive 20% off your entire first order. That's ALDEN, and receive 20% off your entire first order. Guys, all of their underwear is backed by their best pair you'll ever wear, or its free guarantee, so you really have nothing to lose. Visit TommyJohn.com.